Hello and welcome to the Red Leaf Card, your home for Canadian soccer news and views. My name is Jacob, and today we're going to be talking about the actual signings of the coach for Toronto FC and also the signing of a loanee for Toronto FC, Theo Corbeanu. And also some great announcements of what's happening in Kingston, Ontario, and the updates for the transfers for the Canadian Premier League. And we're having some guests to our show, and I would like for all the guests to know what they are.
Hi, my name is Alex Leal. I'm originally here from Toronto, and yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about everything with Toronto FC and also the CPL team in Kingston and all of the transfer updates that have been happening in the CPL.
And I'm Matthew Bridgeman from Mississauga, and it's a pleasure to be on.
I'm Kristian. Jack, welcome to the show, everybody.
Kind of a familiar face to having onto the show, and starting with Toronto FC is a new signing of a coach is Robin Fraser, and who has noticed that Robin Fraser, his previous coaching career was with the Colorado Rapids, and he does have some experience of coaching with the Toronto FC as an assistant coach. So is this actually a good sign for Toronto FC for him to actually lead for Toronto FC for leading them for a better season for them?
I believe so, mostly on the fact of he also used to work with Greg Vanney. He was an assistant coach with Greg Vanney. So I think it's a good step forward for Toronto FC. It's just they need to know how to stay secure with their coaching because this is already their fifth coach since Greg Vanney left, which it's already insane to say that.
I mean, it's like a coach per year, pretty much.
Yeah, basically. But they just need to know how to stay stable with one coach. I think Robin Fraser could be good. He was really good with Colorado Rapids at the start, but then he kind of fell off at the end of his stint.
Yeah, when he left, they were at last place. But yeah, he had the best first 25-game record in their history. And he upticked their offense right away, which I think TFC really needs. They had the fourth lowest expected goals last season in the league, eighth lowest scored. So they were even worse for their expected goals. And, when you have Insigne, who knows if he'll be there. But, Bernadeschi, Prince Owusu was playing good, even though they let him go. They, I think, need to be higher up in that category, and hopefully he can bring that. And I think the best thing is he knows the city. He knows the club inside and out. He was here for 4 years. He knows the MLS. As good of a coach, I think, as John Herdman is, he's not really familiar with that league. Coming over from coaching at International, it's a very different scene. But I think it's a good signing for TFC. I think it's good.
I think it's only all because of the whole scandal that's been happening. So I think that's kind of why he left and everything like that. But you also have to look on the fact of their goal, like how their goal scored. Like they got scored on.
Yeah, their defense was bad too. They were
terrible.
8th worst in the league for that as well.
Yeah.
So, KJ, what you thoughts on the new signing for Toronto FC hiring Robin Fraser?
Yeah, as the guy said, it's a familiar face. It's a familiar voice. I think it's a little. Well, I don't think this by looking at social media, which is obviously not always an accurate barometer of what is the actual recap of the fan base, but there's a lot of people disappointed in terms of it being quite an uninspiring hire in their minds. That seems to be a bit of a word that they're using on social media. Robin Fraser is somebody that did very well under Greg Vanney as an assistant. In many ways, I think was more of a mentor to Greg Vanney at that point, having coached prior more than Greg Vanney had at that moment. If you remember when Greg Vanney came in, he didn't really have any experience at that level. But Robin Fraser was the one to help him through that. And now he gets to be given the keys and he gets to drive instead of being in the passenger seat. So I think it gives him an opportunity. But, I'm not quite sure if it's the hire that some people wanted in terms of inspiring this team going forward. But, we have to think about where they've come from and where they are right now and where they want to go. And I think that calm, steady hand is needed. And they also need to get back to getting better people with better personalities. And Robin is always going to be someone who treats people well and is kind enough to be able to take care of that from a temperament point of view.
Yeah. So, but I think this is a question for like one of the TFC. Some of the fans would say, would the opportunity for Bobby Smarionis to actually coach for TFC?
I mean, I think he's proven himself really well at Forge. They've dominated the CPL a lot of years. Obviously, they won the league last season, but didn't win the final. It's kind of a curse in that league. No team has won the division, like the league, regular season, and gone on to win the cup. But I think he's proven it. Obviously, it is a risk to sign him going from the CPL, big step up to the MLS. But I think it probably, I mean, you were talking about uninspired, Kristian. I think that would have been a more inspired signing because it is giving somebody a chance from the CPL, the Canadian scene, who has proved himself really well, been there a lot of years. They've easily been the number one franchise in the CPL. And, sure, it might have not worked out. That's the same with everything. Not everything is guaranteed. But I think he probably has deserved it, but we'll see how this goes with Robin Fraser. If it doesn't work out, then maybe they can look and promote him from, well, not promote him, but take him in from Forge.
Yeah, there's different ways to look at it, right? Like, I think we have to look around the world and see how other football countries operate. And I think it's clear that if Toronto FC, let's just take away the US, the connection to the US for a second. If TFC was a Major League Soccer franchise in Canada, playing in Canada predominantly, and the Canadian Premier League was, let's call it like the championship version of that,
Yeah.
I think Bobby Spiniotis would have got the job.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have to say that MLS is still extremely highly influenced by the United States. Their headquarters are in New York. A lot of the coaches are given jobs and opportunities are American. And I think that certainly plays a major factor in this, is that it's not seen in a vacuum of Canadian soccer. It's more North American.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But you also have to look on the fact of, I think with Robin Fraser, he could help build back that history not history, but that culture that we had with Greg Vanney, where it was always just fighting till the last minute and seeing to get the win every time. And just like the last TFC game I went to, it was against the New York Red Bulls. And it kind of like, it didn't look like we wanted a fight to be there. It just looked like the players wanted to just be there just to get paid, basically. But I don't know. I think Smirnotis could have been a good shout as a coach, but we'll just see with Robin Fraser.
Yeah, and we all see how Toronto FC has struggled at the time, and we've seen now like Toronto FC. Now it's like the battle with Toronto and Forge FC in Hamilton, and we've seen how they performed with their previous coach John Herdman. Now it's just at this time we're seeing this upcoming Canadian Championship. Toronto FC is now going to be versing Club de Foot Montreal, and that's going to be one of the biggest struggles, and a big point there that they would have to go for starting all in the first round and see how to, and also climb up all those rounds for Robin Fraser in his start of his head coaching for Toronto FC. And this is going to be a huge, this is going to be a big stepping stone for Robin Fraser, that there's going to be a lot of hard task out there for Toronto FC for this upcoming season.
Yeah, it's more of a kind of like rebuild year for TFC, especially after like what happened with John Herdman, where there were times that it looked like he could have made the playoffs with TFC at last season, but it just fell down a cliff. So it is kind of a rebuild sort of year for Toronto FC.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because they keep talking about wanting to win now and wanting to make the playoffs, which of course you'd always want to make the playoffs, especially they haven't made it since 2020. And when you consider since 2022, they've had the second, well, until Messi came in, the highest paid player in Insigne and the sixth highest paid player in Bernadeschi. They have the second and sixth highest paid players currently in the MLS and not make the playoffs a single year with them is really poor. But, with the talks about them wanting to let go of Insigne, who knows if they'll really be able to get that across the line because of his wages. Like, he might not want to leave himself. They, I think it should be probably a rebuilding phase, at least a pseudo rebuilding, but they want to keep on the Bernardeschi, which I don't hate that. I love Bernardeschi, and he is a good player, a great player, and he definitely seems like he wants to be here, gives a lot. He's a lot more fit than Insigne during the season, but it is weird how they talk about wanting to win now and wanting to make the playoffs, but at the same time, their roster moves don't really indicate that. Like letting go of Prince Owusu, their top scorer last season, to Montreal, they haven't really brought in a goal scorer, so it's going to be a weird season. We kind of just have to see where it goes. Like, I'm excited to watch them. I definitely think they will be better, but it is a bit of a question mark, I think, right now going in.
Any thoughts on that, KJ?
I think it's clear that they need to move on from Insigne. I don't think he's shown over the past couple of years anywhere close to the level that they need him to be. Look, it's not the case of what can you get for him. It's just a case of whether you want to eat the salary at this point and just move on at that moment. I think the striker will come. I think they're still looking for that. And my other thing about Bernardeschi is I think that he in many ways, if with Insigne being there, has helped him because everyone evaluates him as a comparison to Insigne, which I think is wrong. I still don't think Bernardeschi is anywhere near the level that he should be for this club.
Yeah.
And I think when you think about the value that you're getting, just because they're not getting the value out of Insigne doesn't mean that we should suddenly say, well, Bernardeschi's okay. Like ultimately, they're both massive failures at this point when you evaluate the signings, and that's why they are where they are. For me, they're massive failures. And it's not just about, one guy's got how many goals and how many assists. It's about building a culture of winning and creating that and inspiring people to get on their shoulders and dig deep and win games. And so maybe he has that in him under a new coach. But I'll be shocked to see if Insigne has that in him. I just think it's probably over at this point. And they need to find a new number 9, as Matthew said.
I think with Prince Owusu too, the problem with him was, okay, he's a good striker, don't get me wrong, but he missed so many clear-cut chances that he could have just finished so easily. So I am kind of optimistic of them letting him go. I was actually fine with that. They do need to find a new number 9, but I think it was a good thing for them to let go of Prince Owusu.
I just think it's a bit of a risk.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because they don't, right now, this team is really, I think their biggest problem is they're lacking in goals. Like, in terms of stats, but Bernardeschi was their top goal scorer with 8. It was Owusu with 9. But in terms of expected goals, it was Bernardeschi with 9.8. He had 8 goals. Owusu had 9.7 XG. And then it goes a massive drop off to Kerr and Insigne with 3 and 4 respectively. Expected goals are the same. Like, I just think, like, of course, like you said, Kristian, you think the striker will come, and I'm sure it will. Like, it has to. It's just I don't necessarily think it needed to be Owusu out, a new striker in. I think they probably should have kept Owusu and then brought in another striker or another wide forward who could have scored, or maybe some goals from midfield, because I just feel like that's where the team is struggling. Of course, part of it is also obviously the way they play and how they create, how they build up from the back. But
I think they also just want to try building on DeAndre Kerr, which I can understand. He's also young.
Yeah.
But like with the fact on Insigne, for example, he just has not been performing. He's also been so injury prone. Like he can never stay fit. And with the fact on Bernardeschi, he at least shows passion to wanting to play for TFC and wanting to do good for TFC. But there's also times where, I'm going to reference Man United for a second, but there's also times that he acts like a Bruno Fernandes and is just crying about everything.
That's what everybody talks about that with Bernardeschi and Insigne. Sometimes their attitude on the pitch is really lacking. And obviously the stories, I mean, it was a while ago now, but the stories about what they were doing off the pitch and stuff with, that was obviously very poor. So that's a big thing. I mean, the attitude and the culture with the team needs to improve. I mean, that's what TFC used to be heralded for, was their culture when, under the glory days of Greg Vanney and stuff. But yeah, so they need to get back to that. That's why I think the Robin Fraser appointment could be good in that sense, get some of that belief back, some of that culture back, some of that just way of playing, way of fighting, attitude, personality. But still, the roster right now it worries me a bit.
Yeah, and so always the whole drama with trying to find that big signing as a striker for Toronto FC. But right now, they have actually tried to find basically a striker, and he actually plays for Granada CF, but it's not a full transfer of a signing. It's more of a loan for Toronto FC for this upcoming season for 2025, and they signed a Canadian striker, Theo Corbeanu, and a lot of people do have a lot of mixed feelings. Also, it's this whole thing of what's happening for Toronto FC, what their views are on signing players. It's just like the fans are always saying we want something actually big. We want actually saying we don't like what our players are doing from their previous season. Like like we mentioned, Lorenzo Insigne, Bernardeschi, all of them out, but having a young player like him, does this basically improve for the 2025 season?
I don't know. I don't know about improving itself, mostly because, okay, I do think Theo Corbeanu is good. Don't get me wrong. But I don't know about him improving. He doesn't really look like a striker to me. He's more of a winger that cuts inside.
Yeah, right winger.
Yeah. So I don't know. And he's also like been bounced around so much.
Yeah.
I will say, like, it's nice to see a former Toronto FC Academy player coming back.
Yeah,
it is
exactly.
very nice to see
I
that.
agree.
But he's been bounced around like so much. He went to Sheffield, Sheffield United. He went to MK Dons. He went to Blackpool. He went to Germany. He went to Switzerland. Like, he never could stay in one team. So it's very risky. It is very risky for him.
I don't know. Maybe for him, I don't know how risky it is for TFC because it is a loan. There is an option to buy, not an obligation, which is good. I couldn't find the fee for the option to buy. Hopefully it's a set fee, so if he does perform, they don't, Granada doesn't increase it. But I like that it's a loan because if he doesn't perform, okay, whatever, you move on from it. I like that he is a young Canadian player who was in TFC's academy. I'll never complain about TFC playing young Canadians, whether it's from their academies or whether it's from League One, wherever across Canada. I'll never complain about that. They need to do that more. I mean, everyone pretty much agrees on that. And but yeah, in terms of, he's played 13 games this season for Granada, no goals. We'll have to see how he plays. If Bernardeschi is staying, he kind of plays in his position on the right wing. I know Bernardeschi can play anywhere across the front line and in midfield. Obviously he's played wing back before, but usually plays right wing for TFC, and that's where Corbeanu likes to play. But we'll have to see. I mean, it could be a hit. It could be a miss. It's all right that it's a loan, but, they definitely need more in terms of attack, I think, TFC going into the season.
And so, KJ, what's your thoughts on Theo actually playing for TFC for this season?
Yeah, I mean, if I was evaluating whether I would bring him in, I'd be looking at a couple of different things. First of all, I think it was Alex who said, look, this guy's been at 7 clubs in 5 seasons.
Thank you,
so,
KJ.
What is that right away that is the reason why he can't sell? He was in Canada's camp and looked like somebody who would flourish in an area where lots of young players would flourish, and then was suddenly cast aside and not picked again, right? So there's something not clicking there, right? And so for me, that is something to be aware of, but not necessarily a red flag. That might be an opportunity, right, for you to bring him in, bring him back closer to home, bring him somewhere where he can thrive, and then go out there and deliver. This is somebody who's played, as you said, in Spain, played in Switzerland, played in Germany, played in the lower leagues of England, and so should not be fearing the opposition in Major League Soccer. Should be very comparable to some of the places he's played in the past, and should be able to go out there and deliver. I think it was Matthew who said, this is a winger. This is a direct winger who can attack fullbacks and supply balls into the box, cut in and maybe score goals himself. So there's a lot of things to like about it. I just hope that they've made the signing for the right reasons and not, he's just Canadian and we can bring him in and make it comfortable for us. If you're a TFC fan spending a lot of money on tickets, you hope that they're casting a very wide net when they're looking to bring players in, and not just ones that are just close to home because they can see them.
True.
Yeah, I agree. And it's you have to also look on the fact of this is Toronto FC, and soccer is growing in this country. So you kind of want to try and develop those youngsters, like all the youngsters that we have right now at TFC with DeAndre Kerr, with a guy like Jonathan Osorio who's been with Toronto FC for so long. Even like I grew up with a Michael Bradley or a Jonathan Osorio because they were at Toronto FC for a long time. I know Michael Bradley came from Roma, but he was there for a long time. He knew the culture of Toronto FC. With Corbeanu or Corbeano, I don't know exactly if that's right or wrong. He could help because he's back in his home, he's back at home.
Yeah, he played in their academy for 2 years, from 2016 to 2018.
Yeah, and he could help to bring that culture back, but you never know with him. He could be a great loan, or he can just flop as a loan. Like, you never know.
So, mention about how TFC grew the sport of soccer in Canada. There's even happening in the Canadian Premier League. A lot of things happening. But Canada Soccer in Kingston, Ontario, there has been big news from the mayor of Kingston campaigning on having a soccer specific stadium in the downtown core of Kingston, and a lot of news coming in that the first stage of the idea for this project has passed, and so it's a green light for Kingston, Ontario, for Canada Soccer to grow probably in the Kingston area of Ontario, probably for a possible expansion team in Kingston for Canadian Premier League. So, KJ, what's your thoughts on the on that news in Kingston, Ontario?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's inevitable. We should be having more of these across Canada. I don't think there's a lot of, I mean, I speak as someone who knows quite a lot about this, being at the Canadian Premier League, so I have to be careful what I can say here, but it's quite obviously, but I don't think there's any news in terms of, you know, it coming to becoming a franchise as early as this week or next year or anything like that. But I think we should have more communities that are looking to do this. Ultimately, this sport is growing in this country. Sporting culture is growing in this country. When you think about this country and the ability to bring more stadiums, practice facilities, sporting landscapes to certain places, we are miles behind. Certainly miles behind a country that's up to our south, which we're not going to be able to cover. But for the amount of money that we have in this country and the land mass, we're miles behind when it comes to stadium infrastructure and lots of facilities for sports. So I'm excited to hear places like Kingston, whether it be Kingston, whether it be Windsor, whether it be Kitchener, whether it will be Kelowna, places like that that are looking to bring the Canadian Premier League to their areas, because not only is it important for sport, but it's important for people. We all want to connect with the communities and have people go and support these things because it represents them. We're very big city focused in this country, and if you live, 5 hours away from Winnipeg, Manitoba, you're likely supporting the Jets. If you're living 3 hours away from Toronto, you're likely supporting Toronto FC or the Leafs. Let's bring them these local markets opportunities to be able to support the big clubs, but also support their own in a regional area. And that's what we've seen with the CPL, right? We've seen them go to Langley, we've seen them go to Langford on the Vancouver Island, we've seen them go to Halifax, amongst many others, where these local communities can get behind teams. Go together, support them as they need to, and then also understand that this is a club that features them and looks after them and represents them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree. I think it's the perfect kind of place for, I think it's, where the CPL needs to target, because, it's a big enough city to support a team with a good enough population, but it's not so big it already has teams competing with it. Like, we talk about the team here in Toronto, like, York United. They unfortunately had one of the the lowest average attendance last season, and that's because they're competing with TFC, they're competing with the Leafs, they're competing with Blue Jays, they're competing with the Raptors. Whereas a place like Kingston, they're not really competing with anything. They only have an AHL team there, and there's a lot of support for it there. With the mayor did a poll, and there was 90% in favor through like a 450 vote, I believe. And I think it's perfect. Yeah, like the other places you said, like Kitchener, Waterloo, they have a huge soccer fan base there that would love a team. And I think it's the perfect kind of markets where there's not really other teams competing with them. So fans go there. You look at the Forge, you look at Halifax, they all have great attendance. And they're targeting obviously 2 teams by the 2026 co-hosted World Cup here. And I think it would be a great location.
Yeah, I think Kingston would be great. And you also have to look on the fact of look at these teams like Edmonton, like Forge FC, like a Kingston. They're trying to build the community itself, like KJ said. You want to try and build a community because that's what soccer is. Soccer is just a community-built game. Everyone can play it no matter who they are. And having it in Kingston is such a great opportunity for them because they can just flourish with getting people of certain ages or certain demographics and just play. And that's just what the beautiful game is about.
Yeah, I think Kingston is a great place to actually have a team. As known as there is a history about Kingston of having a soccer team.
Yeah.
If you go up to, for example, if you bring up League One Ontario, that there used to be a team called Kingston Clippers.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of historical things about Kingston of their soccer. They have academies there, and I think that there is some space to actually have a soccer stadium there and be more open for more sports out there.
Yeah.
And I think Kingston is more good out there, and mentioned that there's also other cities out there that are willingly to try to have a soccer stadium out there. As noticed that Mississauga also is into getting a team out there.
Yeah.
Actually, a stadium out there. Which I've heard on the news that they're trying to get an 8,000 attendee stadium, where right at Square One, and right now it's just right now they're just waiting until the date until they pass that project and see how Mississauga goes for like the mayor of Mississauga would do with this bill to try to pass a soccer specific stadium in Square One, but right now see how it goes for Canada soccer out there, but other cities out there willingly to get that. And mentioned Kelowna also, and that they were still in that market to try to get a expansion team for the Canadian Premier League. And we know that they had an event called CPL on tour.
Yeah,
it really did well. And now we all know that the CPL season is almost coming into it to close in. Now the transfer markets of the Canadian Premier League has been a lot of change. Has been a lot of changes. Some big signings, some not good for some fans out there who had have a lot of heart for some players that played former CPL teams. A lot of big changes in Atletico Ottawa that they had. So if you look at their new signing for that they just had a few days ago, that played for Atletico St. Louis, I think at that point that of signing Juan Castro, midfielder for Atletico Ottawa, it's like, in my opinion, I think it's a good signing for an experienced player. So Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great signing for them, especially with like a player of his caliber that scored 19 times and lifted 3 trophies for Atletico San Luis. And he's also 33, so the guy could bring the experience for the team, for Atletico Ottawa. And he could also help the CPL gain more attraction. signing a player like him, like Juan Castro, to the CPL, it's such a big move for them.
I mean, I think, yeah, he's the appearance holder for Atletico San Luis. I won't lie, the age, I mean, yeah, he brings in a lot of experience. They did finish, they were third last season. And so, yeah, maybe they're just trying to get over that hump, win the league, get to the final, and maybe they think he'll help them with that. Obviously he's a very good player, massively experienced player, played in a fantastic league in the Liga MX. The age, I do think, is slightly questionable, 33. It is just a one-year deal with a team option, I believe, for the second year. But it's an interesting one. Yeah, I have to keep an eye on it for sure, how he does.
KJ,
Yeah,
what's
it's winning mentality, no? Like, this is what they needed to bring, right? Like, last year they won the Winter Championship, which meant nothing. And everybody was talking about all these signings that they brought in. But a lot of those signings were brought in because they'd won something in Canadian Premier League as well. They'd done something. You think about Manny Aparicio, they was able to bring him over, right? Matteo Di Brienne had won the Young Player of the Year. Amir Didic had been involved in a lot of big games in the past. Kevin Santos, Balu Tabler was there when they won the 2022 regular season trophy. But it still was not able to get them playing at a style that was consistent all season that required them of being champions. And that champions mentality, for whatever reason, is lacking. It's not got them over the line. I did the game in the semi-final in Forge in Hamilton this year, and Forge were vulnerable. They were nowhere near at the level they were all season long. And subsequently, we found that out in the final. They were there for the taking. And if there was ever an opportunity for Ottawa to go and win a big away game in the playoffs for the first time like that, to go there and deliver a message, it was that. Yet they just kind of just surrendered and walked off the field like, meh, okay, well, we weren't supposed to win. And I interviewed Carlos Gonzalez, the then head coach at the time. And he was like, well, it's still a positive season. We didn't make the playoffs last season, and we finished third. We've made the semis. We've made progress. And I just couldn't see it that way. I just felt there was a missed opportunity at that time for that group of players. And, you don't get many opportunities to win things in football. And that was a real opportunity for for them to keep climbing and then go to Calgary, where they always consistently win against Cavalry and deliver. So they missed that chance to get a new coach now. And I think they've got to bring that mentality over, which Castro will help.
and also there has been some players that have just left, but for Atletico Ottawa, I know the shocking moments for Atletico Ottawa that just left. Even you have Matt DeBrene. He leaves and goes plays in Sweden, and not just you have also an experienced player, Chris Twardek. He actually leaves to another Canadian Premier League team, and it's Valor FC. And also Ollie Bassett, who goes to Thunder Bay Rowdies. And so there's a lot that some of these the players that leave Atletico Ottawa, it kind of shows that some of these players were actually good for Atletico Ottawa, but not for this season. But not even you have Ryan Yesley, who signs with Halifax Wanderers, and I think there's been big steals for some of the Canadian Premier League teams getting some Atletico Ottawa players.
Yeah, they've had a lot of departures, and some of those, like, yeah, you were saying Chris Twardek to Valor FC. I think that's a great pickup, and they've lost a lot of players. It is kind of worrying for them. I love the players they brought in, not just Juan Castro, but Jesus Del Amo from Real Avilis, Elias Iliades from Montreal. I think they've got a lot of good signings, but a lot of departures as well. It's going to be tough for them. I think, still need to fill out their roster a bit. Part of football is also getting rid of some players. You got to clear, like a better word, dead weight, and clear up, contracts, clear up space. You don't want a bloated roster. That's just as bad as having a thin roster. But it is kind of worrying for a team that, like you say, Kristian, was really close to the finals this year, and that is trying to win. So we'll have to see how it goes for them. It's tough to judge right now, but
They also have like a young squad, so I can understand where like all the clear out and everything that they need, but they definitely just need like they need a bigger squad that they can help compete and stay like high in the Canadian Premier League. But yeah, I don't know.
Mr. Jack, any players that you think that left on your thoughts of Atletico Ottawa?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Bassett's the one, but I think it was time for him to try and inspire himself a little bit more. He's proven everything, won everything, and almost everything he needed to do with Ottawa. Gets a chance to go play in Tampa Bay with the Rowdies, the USL. They'll miss his creativity, but I would say that last year they probably didn't use him in the best positions that he can get out of him anyway. So for me, it all comes down to the new coach, right? What is this new coach going to do? How is he going to play? And in Ottawa, their fan base is very passionate and caring about it. And do they now get rewarded for patience with a little bit more quality football on the ball rather than being known for a strictly defensive team that couldn't create a lot of opportunities, which is what they had under Carlos Gonzalez?
Yeah. So now we move on to Calvary FC, which some of the players have moved out. Which as noticed, Dan Klump has been sources coming out that he might actually play for an A-League team in Australia. And as noticed, William Akio, his contract was terminated. And then later, Malcolm Shaw his option was declined, and the only player that actually which they had on loan, which was Jay Herdman, who played for Vancouver Whitecaps FC2, and so Calgary FC probably, in my opinion, took actually a good signing to say they're going to take the signing with their contract was expired with Vancouver Whitecaps FC, and take that give him a contract with Calgary FC. And at this point, I think signing Jay Herdman was a good signing for Calgary FC.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, I mean, he was there last season. They're bringing him back. I think it's a good signing. He was just a good, solid player for them. And I like that they locked up a lot of their core. Obviously, they just won the league, so I think that's super important to keep all the guys together. So far, I've liked what they've done the offseason, and I'm excited to see if they can, retain the title.
Yeah, they have a very young squad, and they have a very like good team itself. It sucks that they had to lose like Dan Klomp and Malcolm Shaw and Jose Escalante. Like, it sucks, but I do still think they have a very good squad to challenge for the title.
KJ?
I mean, they've kept a lot of players, and continuity is hard to keep in Canadian Premier League. But it's also linked to success, right? You need to make changes, and you understand that. But if you can keep a lot of players like Forge have done in the past to continue to build something, I think that's really important. And, without going over their entire roster, we know Ed's back, Camargo's back, Carducci's back, Daly's back, right? Like Gutierrez, you mentioned Jay Herdman's coming in, Camden and Kobzer and Montgomery and Moosey and Shome and Trafford, like Washevsky's, these guys that's an incredible Canadian Premier League squad who know how to win now.
Yeah.
And they've got great home advantage. They've kept the squad. They've kept Tommy Wheeldon Jr. And so, I think that they always were very talented. Now they actually know how to win. They become even more of a massive powerhouse in the Canadian Premier League, understanding that Klomp is a very, very difficult player to replace.
Yeah. Do you think they're the favorites for the title coming in next season, Kristian?
I think there's a lot of things you can look at, but yeah, I would say that with their, we'll have to find out when everything's done what Forge end up with and what they're going to do, because I think as of right now, at least publicly, they're maybe 60%, 70% roster full. So let's find out what they do at the start. But it always starts with those two anyway. But yeah, having won the trophy at the end, as Forge consistently reminded people for 4 or 5 years, you got to go through them, right?
Yeah.
And now you got to go through Cavalry.
Yeah, and well, the bad news is about for Calgary FC, they would have to playing Starlight Stadium for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which is not a good sign for them.
No.
So hoping Calvary FC will have everything fixed for trying to play for Atco Field in the future. But the roster is actually good, but trying to stay where they play for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, not doing well for them. So I know we go to the regular season champs, Forge FC. A lot of changes,
Yeah.
and probably even also some
controversy.
controversy again. Like for example, you had from Tristan Henry, the goalkeeper, about his contract, and their signing of Brian Wright, a big steal for Forge FC coming out of York United. So I want to start with the whole controversy with Bandi Banga of him saying that he's not part of the team for the upcoming season. So any thoughts about Bandi Banga of his whole controversy with it not being part of the team?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a really bad look, right? Forge posts on their Instagram that they've re-signed him in a post, and then he comments underneath it that it's false, that he terminated his contract on January 6th for just cause. It would be, it says that he is still with them, but he's not reported to preseason training. I mean, Bedi Badabanga is an electrifying player. I've watched him play at Tim Hortons Field. He's a fantastic player. I've seen him score some absolute bangers. But right now, it's not looking great. I mean, obviously, we don't really know what's really going on. But if they do lose him, that's a massive loss because I think he is a fantastic player. And replacing a player like that in the CPL is very hard. He can dribble past players with ease. He can score outside the box, almost regularly. It feels like he is a massive creative force for them. I am really, it was no brainers, but they re-signed Kyle Becker and Tristan Borges, which are great signings. I mean, that people would have been shocked if they didn't keep them. That's the core. Like those are the two. When you think of Forge FC, you think of those two. And like you said, Brian Wright, signing him from York United is fantastic. He was Players Player of the Year, scored 9 goals and 6 assists for not a very good York United team. So what happens with Bedi Banga, that'll definitely help with goals and assists. They also let go of Terran Campbell, who's the all-time top goal scorer in CPL and all-time appearance maker. So that, I don't like you said, Kristian, they still have a lot for their roster. So we'll have to see what they bring in. But the Bedi Banga thing is a little bit worrying for me.
It's worrying, especially for the team itself. Like you have all this controversy right before the season starts too, and it doesn't suck and it doesn't put a good note for the team itself already coming into the season. But yeah, like as Matthew said, Brian Wright is a steal for a team like Forge FC to be getting, and they still have a very good team for the CPL. So it's going to be tough to see them and Calvary FC battling it out this season for the title.
KJ, any thoughts on the Bedi Banga situation?
I'll just say that I think Forge always find a way, right? Doesn't matter like what, if there's not someone willing to play for them or however it's going to go down, they'll find a different way to play and go from there. We've seen the signing of Brian Wright, the rumors of Babuli, Tristan Borges being back. So automatically, if you put all that together, you can see they're going to play a little bit of a different style, right? So whether that doesn't necessarily means they're going to be a little bit more of a 4-2-3-1 team without the wingers, or whether they play a bit more 4-4-2, different things they can bring in there. There's lots of ways that you can do it, but they've got Borges back and Brian Wright, that number 9 that they haven't really had, who can get in behind and not necessarily come towards the ball like a lot of strikers they have in the past, but can actually stretch opponents' defenses and be that poacher. So I think they'll be fine, and I am, watch this space because more signings to come for them.
Yeah. So Forge FC right now, contract expiring. You mentioned Terran Campbell is like, there's a lot of players that they met, they're core players. Terran Campbell, you have Jordan Hamilton as known as the experienced player who's not played that much, but former Toronto FC player. Alexandra Hajapapur, good player, good defensive mid player. And Dominic Samuel, also a defensive player. That's a lot of players that they have released. And Halifax Wanderers did not really do for this upcoming season. Actually, the current previous season, that they were not really doing well. They didn't make the playoffs. A lot of fans said that Halifax Wanderers were the favorites to go to the playoffs, but did not perform for the 2024 season. So good signings have been named. You have a actual former York United player, Isaiah Johnston, and Ryan, as known as Ryan Yesley, who played for Atletico Ottawa. He was for the bench for Atletico Ottawa, and Thomas Miguel Giguère for Pacific FC comes in for a free transfer. Looking at Halifax Wanderers, I feel like they made some good signings for this upcoming season.
Yeah, they absolutely did, because they have what I'm seeing from this roster, they have a very young team that could push to make it to the playoffs. And look at, for example, Tavio Ciccarelli. He's coming off of Sheffield United on a free transfer. He's only 18. The kid could be something. And Isaiah Johnston coming off of York United, Vuba Yaran Yesley from Atletico Ottawa. They have a young squad that could push to make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, I really like the signing of Isaiah Johnston, young midfielder coming out of Ludon United in the USL, has played with York United before in the CPL. I think he could really help them, give them a spark, some fight in midfield, creativity as well. He can kind of do it all, I think. I think that's a great signing for them. And yeah, they're just trying to be better than they were last year. They're not necessarily looking to, win versus Forge or Calvary. They just want to improve, I think. And I think with their signings will definitely help them do that.
KJ, any thoughts on Halifax Wanderers signings?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've gone through a period where they peaked in 23, let themselves down a little bit in 24, didn't achieve what they needed to do, had that, just that gut-wrenching knockout tie, where they got beat to CS Saint Laurent, and it rocked them for a long time, and they were underachievers in 24, potential overachievers in 23. So to Matthew's point, it's okay, what are you? What are you going to be? What do you stand for? And for me, with that fan base, with Patrice Geyser's year 3, with still the same kind of players coming back that we're used to having, with that, again, I'm big on continuity as much as you can possibly have it. They've improved in goal for me by getting Yesley. They've got Alphonse there now. They've kept Diaz and Gagnon Lapare and Rampersad, the leaders, Sean Rea. So if they can get a Rea, Rampersad, Johnston kind of midfield going and play them consistently with TMG at the back, better in goal, and try and find a way for Coimbra to score more, then they're a playoff team. That's where they need to be aiming to be. And then when you play a home game in the playoffs, which is certainly what they hope to do if they get in the top 4, then they're going to be difficult to beat, right? That's the key for me for them. But yeah, keep an eye on them. They've still got some roster spots to go. It'll be interesting what they do. Nimic and Caligari, who arguably their 2 best players, are still kind of hanging out there, ready to be signed somewhere. So I think it'd be great if they could bring one of those back.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So onto the other coast of Canada, you have Pacific FC. So as noticed that you have a former York United player that's signed, and also even signing Halifax Wanderers midfielder Aiden Daniels. So what I'm mentioning of former CPL player Ronnie Kratz, he's played in the Bundesliga of the second team, Werder Bremen, which there's second team is for that. And as noticed that Halifax Wanderers also who've actually been out, that so you have Reed, who's no longer with Pacific FC. He's now with York United. Kind of big one for of get a big transfer for one of the CPL teams that took one of their key players, and also even Selfor no longer being with Pacific FC, and there's a lot of players that are with Pacific that have played for Pacific FC are no longer with them. But as noticed, the signings for Pacific FC, Ronan Kratz and Aiden Daniels. So, thoughts on how Pacific has signed one of their players?
Yeah, with Ronan Krat, it's actually very cool for them because of how he has the Bundesliga experience, and it's good to see them bringing a player of that caliber that has that experience of the Bundesliga to a CPL team. It'll be perfect for them. I just do think they have a very thin squad and that they just need to try and fill out that roster because they have a very thin squad and it won't work for the CPL team if they have a squad like this, and they just need to have more players, more guys that could help them.
I agree. I mean, I'm excited to see what Marco Dominguez can do, joining now at the start of the season, fresh defensive midfielder they signed last season in June from Guatemala. I think he's a good player, exciting player. I think he could be one of the better midfielders in the CPL, absolutely, and I'm excited to see what he can do with a full, preseason, now with the team for a year now. And they got two players back on loan from Vancouver FC. One is a loan from Vancouver FC with Dyer Moses, and one is back on loan, Saluf Ayman. I'm excited to see what those guys can do. I think they'll help a lot, but yeah, losing a lot of players is a bit of a worry for the CPL. Like, not retaining your squad has kind of shown in the past to have bad consequences, but it'll be interesting to see where they go.
Yeah. So what was it, Marco Domin?
Yeah.
Yeah. So mentioning that his contract is also terminated.
Oh, they were sorry. I completely missed that. My apologies.
Yeah. So
My bad.
I have to tell you that. So KJ, on thoughts for Pacific FC's signings?
Yeah, I mean, Pacific have been going down the wrong end of the table for a couple of years now, where they were obviously the champions in 21. I think they're only bringing back about 9 or 10 players. So they've got a lot of shopping to do. Obviously, they've got longer to get these players right. They're not playing in CONCACAF next month, and like Cavalry and Forge. So they are looking, obviously, to get these players, and they're difficult to evaluate at this point. We know that Zanata and Young and Hurd and Melvin and these players, Gazdov, are back, and they're going to have to build around those. Quintana's a player for me who's a centre back that I really liked last year, and Ali Endom is a player that they had as a centre back that did his cruise ship within like 4 or 5 games of last season, and they were really high on him. So they may not technically look to replace Thomas Meajaguer if they believe that Endom and Quintana can play together, but they'll still need to bring some more centre back depth in there for sure.
Yeah. Now we're seeing even in Winnipeg in Valor FC. I see that a lot of fans are having their eyes on with Valor FC of a lot of big signings for its, and as known for their actual substitute goalkeeper for York United goes with Valor FC. Maris, as noticed, Atletico Ottawa, Chris Tordick, big steal from them from Atletico Ottawa with an undisclosed fee, and former Valor FC defensive that and played for Valor FC from the previous season, Rocco Romero, a good signing for Valor FC at this point. And as noticed, Noah Verhoeven, who was on loan with Valor FC, goes back, and Marcelo Polisi got his contract expired, and he goes to Detroit City FC. And thoughts on Valor FC of their signings.
I'm really excited. Yeah, Rock Romero I think is great. Obviously, Chris Twardek is a fantastic signing. And the main things I think for them is that they've kept their entire core pretty much. They've got a whole core coming back that grew into the second half of the season, and I think could definitely be competing with Forge and Cavalry. And, I think this could be a season where they win it. I think they look really exciting and just smart moves, keeping the core together, and I'm excited, yeah.
They also lost a ton of players too, with free agents and everything. Like, they lost a ton of players, but they do have a good young core, and they brought back Gianfranco Facineri. They have Himaras now. They have a big steal in Twardek. Rocco Romeo could be very good, and yeah, they're looking very good to possibly challenge for the title.
Yeah, and not just also mentioning it of who they also are keeping is also former TFC players, Berea, and also Antonoglu, who that his contract was triggered. His contract got triggered to expand for his optional team contract, and it looks like Valor FC at this point has a good core roster, but it does question a lot of the next players who they're going to be signing at the point. So KJ, your thoughts on Valor FC of their players that they signed?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big year for them and their coach, right? They were very disappointed last year. They didn't have an easy run with the start of the season with the stadium, meaning that they were away from home till June. But when they are able to get Rocco Romeo basically to replace Tas Modakudis, who's gone back to Australia, I think that's a big signing for them to get some stability at centre back. They have lost quite a lot of players, but they still have, as you guys have said, the core, right? When you can think about Alarcon can play right back. Mudakudis and Facineri, centre back. They've kept hold of Temi Antonoglu, one of the best players in the Canadian Premier League at left back. You can get a midfielder playing Dante Campbell in midfield with Raf O'Heen. Suddenly you're thinking, okay, well, Twardek can be a winger now because we don't need him at right back as much, where he's openly wanting to play more going forward anyway. And then you've got Ferrier who can play there. You've got depth with Reza Rassau. They've got Hundal there. They've lost Swibble, so they need a goal scorer. I don't know anything about that or they're searching for, but maybe a Jordan Hamilton, Terran Campbell, or somebody to kind of complete that puzzle. That certainly would be great for them.
Yeah, and also going to Vancouver FC, there's been not that we've not heard of any signings yet, but a lot of, but we also heard that their goalkeepers have been that are staying, Nico Giansopolis, Callum Irving, and we've also heard Tyler Crawford, Matteo Pagna, also a defender. But as noticed, there has been some source from Brady McDonald who could actually go to Belgium, which there was a source coming in. But as noticed that there's already Ben Fisk. He's announced retirement. Zach Verhoeven, his option got declined. Renan Garcia, his option got declined. There's been also Caden Chung, who's there's a source now that he could go back to Pacific FC. And Austin Ritchie, is no longer with them, and Moses Dyer going to Ireland, which is Galway United, and also Gabriel Bitar is going to York United, and with a first round pick for the youth sports draft for the upcoming draft.
Yeah, I mean. Sorry, go ahead, Jake. So your thoughts on
Vancouver FC?
Well, yeah, right now the roster's very thin, but of course there's a lot of players out there that they can pick up. So I'm sure they'll fill it out in time. But yeah, the Ben Fisk retiring, it's going to be tough for them. He's been in the CPL since its inception. Ton of leadership, ton of
Like a leader?
yes, ton of leadership. Yeah, and so they'll have to a ton of experience.
There you go.
And so they'll be missing that, but hopefully they can find some guys, maybe some veterans that have been in the league that were let go to come in. But yeah, right now the roster's thin, not too many moves. We'll have to see how they do.
Yeah, and me and Jacob were even talking about this before the show even started about Grady McDonald, and it's cool to see a player of his caliber going to a team like Club Bruges. Well, rumors suggesting, and especially with him of his talent of 16 years old going to like Europe, it's very cool to see. But yeah, they have a very thin squad. They need to try and sign players because they've lost a ton of players, and I don't know. They just got to make some moves, or else they're just going to be languishing down in the bottom.
Yeah. Thoughts on Vancouver FC? KJ?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing is they've got Diaz, and he's always going to score goals in the Canadian Premier League. There was a rumor last year that he was going to leave and go back. So his club in Norway, he wanted to stay. They had to work out the finances, but it looks like he's in for the year, which is really important. And now they've got to find a way how to feed him. And then, with Batar leaving, they've lost that source. If McDonald goes, they're arguably one of their best young players. They've lost that source as well. So they're obviously going to bring in some more talented players to play with him and to create that and start a little bit more of a different look to the team. I think it's a big year for Ashton Gott beyond that franchise. Year 3, honeymoon period is over. No more excuses. They were a good enough team last year at large part to make the playoffs and faltered down the stretch. So with leaders like Callum Irving and Paris G, Alejandro Diaz, I think it's important for them to guide that team through the new signings. And I think there should be no excuses now. For me, it's them to make the playoffs this year. Otherwise, it's going to be a big clear out.
Do you think with Grady McDonald possibly leaving, do you think he has a bright future ahead of himself?
Yeah, I hope so. It's very hard to answer that question, Alex, because I think from my notes here, I think he played 14% of the season. Right. So it's a 16-year-old kid who's got all the promise, is physically not even built into his full stature yet, but he's very direct. But he didn't play many minutes. I think just over 400 minutes in the Canadian Premier League season. So I could tell you more about Shola Jimo right now than I can about Grady McDonald. Right. So it's one of those where it's I think he's going to be very good, but at 16, I still think it's very hard to know how good they're going to be. And my hope is that it's not come too early and he finds ways to play games consistently and potentially get more minutes than he did last year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned Shola Jimo, which he's playing for York United. So right now, York United has made a lot of players that have just left. For example, you have players like Mohan Babuli, who's already as a free agent. You have Brian Wright, who's already been announced that he's with Forge FC. Jimenez, which he got signed for Valor FC. A lot of the players that they've loaned, which were really caliber players for York United, who are leaving. And Denis Salanovic also leaving, one of the best goalkeepers, Vincent Cini also leaving, and Noah Abatne also leaving. Even Frank Stirring also right now in that expiring contracts also. So a lot of players that have just left, and signings that York United has signed: Raleigh Ferrazzo from Halifax Wanderers, Gabriel Bitar from Vancouver FC, with that draft pick that they will give to Vancouver FC, and Simcoe County Rovers player Cameron Da Silva and Adonijah Reed from Pacific FC. So I'm going to give it to KJ on his thoughts of York United.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest story is obviously Mauro Eustachio at 31 getting the reins to coach the team, right? Jacob, you and I were there for the press conference, and that's exciting to see what Mauro can do. I think that they have obviously had a bit more turnover than they probably would have expected, only a little bit more. I think you always expect turnover. But the fact that they brought in, the players that you mentioned, and by all accounts, there's quite a few more to come to be excited by as well. I think it's clearly a new era for Mauro Eustachio, clearly a new era for York United and the Pascal brothers, who inherited quite a few contracts last year that they couldn't move out and make it more of their own team, so to speak. But continuing some consistency, right? Max Ferrari, Juan Cordova, Elijah Adekubi, Niall Higgins, Shola Jimo, we mentioned. Frank Stirring, I think, will probably be back. So there's players there that they know, Marky Wojciechowski. So there's some consistency there to know what they stand for. And as you mentioned it, I think that they've gone out there and got some players within the CPL. And I think that by all accounts, looking to continue to do that. So it's a team that got a taste of the Canadian Premier League playoffs last year. They got close to Ottawa, the first penalty shootout. And they'll believe that they can start building something now with a brand new coach and a brand new method that it doesn't feel like that it's on hold. It's more like, let's move forward now and go forward with Mauro.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's exciting with the moves they've made. Hopefully they can take that next step. And I'm excited to see this, a new look defense possibly with Riley Ferrazzo and Cameron Da Silva. Da Silva was one of the best defenders in League One last year. And I'm excited to see how they play together. Of course, the departure of Brian Wright, they need to probably replace him, get some goals in there. I think they will, though. But it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And they also have a ton of young core, with Shola Jimo, for example. We were even talking about it, how he's the youngest scorer ever in Canadian Premier League history, which is insane. And he has a ton of potential. And they've brought in a ton of good players like Riley Ferrazzo, like Adonijah Reed. They have a good team. It's just, especially with a new coach, a new system, and with him having, he's also young too, so the coach could build with the team itself. So you never know.
Yeah. Right now, what York United is now trying to search for is trying to find the goalkeepers for who will they have one of their starting goalkeeper and also their second goalkeeper and many other ones. Right now, it does question about Mohamed Bouli right now. There has been already been a source about, or maybe rumors that he might play for Forge FC since he was been training with Forge FC. But it does question if he might actually be with York United. But it does question that about where will Mohamed Bouli go to. I know. I think KJ actually some would know about it. So KJ, I do want to question about Mohamed Bouli training with the Forge FC.
Well, I mean, we don't know, right? They haven't announced it, but the fact that it's been noticed on social media of him training there, I think is an indication of what's probably to come. Though at that point, I mean, Babouli has played with Forge before. And I think has made a big impact on his time at York, captaining them. He was marvelous in the quarterfinals in Ottawa last year, dragging them to extra time. And unfortunately, as often happens in a shootout, one of the best players missed at that moment, and it might well be the last ball he kicked as a York United player. But it does appear that York United have moved on from that.
Yeah, and it looks like it might still be for an open door for York United. It just questions if there's still interest that the owners of York United would want, since Babouli did really impress York United in the playoffs of making York United win against Pacific FC. So it does question. So I want so Alex, your thoughts on some of the players that are leaving and also some of the signings, or of Mohan Babuli, my bad.
No, don't worry. Yeah. So I wouldn't judge anything off of him just training itself with York United. You never know if he'll stay or not, so you can't really judge off of just training. But I really do hope they keep him because he could be a very good asset for the team. And yeah, I do think they made some really good signings and everything around the team itself. So you just kind of have to wait and see with Mohan Babuli about if he's going to be staying or not.
I mean, I think he's probably going to be leaving. I think that's probably the most likely option for me. I'd be surprised if he went back with them. So it will be a loss for them. But they have, Adonja Reed, I think, could replace some of the things he did for them for York. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, Babuli is a loss for them. Experienced player, really good player. I mean, he's their 10. So
Yeah. So I do think that what we see with York United of the amount of expiring contracts, you have one of the biggest core players. For example, Frank Sturring, also being in that list of his contract expiring, and Abatne also being in that list, who was one of the good defensive players for York United. It does questions of right now how York United will deal with the signings right now for this month, of the next month, or many other days. And that's full time of the Red Leaf Card. You could follow us on X, YouTube, and Spotify. I'm your host, Jacob, subbing out.